Hi,
Hi.
Carol. Hi. I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me
Hear
see.
you fine.
I hope you guys are enjoying the course. Let me pin my window here. I think from the few comments that I've seen in the community group, it seems like, some of you guys have pointed pen experience and others, it's like the first time ever doing pointed pen calligraphy. So I was so impressed and so proud of you guys, seeing all of your homeworks and just really like working super hard for the past couple of weeks. And I've shared this before so many times, but how much you guys engage and share and participate really makes a huge like difference, not only to me, but like to your classmates. So thank you so much. Okay, so we're just gonna get right into it. I am free. I told my husband, don't call me, I'll call you when I'm done. So I'm here for at least an hour, and usually these sessions can go a little over, but you guys are more than welcome to log out, and then I'll send you guys the replay when it's ready. All right, great. So the way that these sessions are laid out for us is that we are going to start with group feedback. So I have printed out a couple of homeworks in front of me, and then I'm going to give you guys some like personal feedback on a handful of homeworks. And then I have a bunch of questions that you guys were submitting. I've gotten like a lot of questions in the past like 24 hours. So I was like scrambling to get those ready for you guys too. And then depending on the time, if you guys do have any additional questions, you're more than welcome to ask away. Okay, so I'm going to flip my camera and then let's see, we'll just go right into it. Okay, so we're gonna start with module 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the warm-ups, basic strokes, lowercase letters, as well as connections. I wanna touch upon everything except the uppercase letters because I'm gonna be releasing that tomorrow, actually on Monday. So I have printed here a couple of homeworks here, and I wanted to give you guys some feedback. So again, the purpose of these basic strokes is, if you guys are familiar with copperplate, it's very similar in that this is such a structured script. So hopefully you guys have already recognized the importance of doing these basics. So the reason why we focus a whole module on these is because getting the right shape of these fundamental strokes will really make an impact on your letter forms when you guys are writing out your words and phrases and sentences. So the main thing that I'm looking for here is that you are staying on your slant line for your straight lines, the consistency in your right curves and your left curve. So this one was by Liza, and I was just going to say that immediately I was really impressed by all the consistency in her strokes. And so the stroke for the right curve and the left curve, right now, this is all hairline stroke. And as you guys saw in the letter forms, there's a lot of letters that will contain this extended right curve or a shortened right curve. And so you just want to make sure that you are practicing not only just these individual strokes, but even as you're connecting it from your right curve to the straight line or the left curve to the straight line. So let me actually go into one of the questions that I received regarding this particular 3 strokes. So the question that I got in the community group from Jessica was, are the tips and edges of the connecting straight line to your left or right curve supposed to be rounded edge or sharp edge? So that was a great question. And so I want to touch upon that now because we're on this topic. So I'm going to be using the 5mm guide sheet. I hope you guys are enjoying practicing on the new guide sheets that I've provided for you guys. Okay, so there is a difference. Generally speaking, when you do the undercurve stroke, so from a straight line to a right curve, you remember how I think I did share in the lessons that it's more of like a check mark. So copperplate is more rounded bottom, but for Spencerian, it's a little bit more of an angular script. And so what I mean by that is, so let me just zoom in here. Okay, So I'm going to show you guys 4 different combinations, and depending on the combinations, and this one I did touch upon in the lessons, but just to remind you guys one more time. Okay, so for the question of, is this supposed to be rounded edge or sharp edge? So I wouldn't say it's any of the connecting strokes should not be rounded. It's more of an angular, really, really tight curves here as you practice. And so the first combination would be the straight line and the right curve. So this is actually a little bit smaller, so I'm going to make it like double. So if I do a straight line down here on your slant line, I'm going to do a sharp, like a really, really tight curve here before I go up for the right curve. Okay, so let's do that again. So straight line to a slight curve here. There should be a little bit of that roundedness on the bottom. I did notice that in some of your homeworks, it could be very tempting to do something like that. You see how this curve right here is a little bit more pointed? When you're doing these undercurve strokes, you do want to aim to have a little bit more of the rounded connecting stroke here. So from here, my hands are like shaking because I was like running. So from here to here, it's going to be more rounded. This one is a little bit more too of like a pointed triangle. So I would say this is not our goal, but this would be our goal. So the rounded angular script for the straight line with the right curve connective angle is going to be more of that angular curve here. But then when we do a straight line to a left curve, let me show you guys. So if we do a straight line here and then we do a left curve up. Okay, so this is in letters like T. The second variation for T, remember we did, it just went straight down on your slant, and then you finish it off with this left curve. So this particular connection is going to be very sharp. So this would be the sharper edge here. So this should be a very pointed tip here. Okay, the connection, you see the angle is very tight here in between these two strokes. Let me just make sure my chat is okay. So this number 2, I'll just label it. So this one was the first connection. The straight line versus the right curve is more angular, but the straight line versus the left curve here is going to be more of the sharper edge. Now moving along, if we were to do a right curve connecting to a straight and then a left curve connecting to a straight. So let me just demonstrate that for you guys. So right curve, I'm going to move it down a little bit here. So right curve, okay, up here, I'm doing it double the height. Right curve and straight, this is also going to be a very sharp edge. So right here, the connection here is very sharp. And again, the angle here is very similar to this stroke. It's just flipped. Okay, so number 2 and number 3 connecting strokes are similar. Okay, this is very sharp. So this is in the letters like U. So when we do lowercase u, we go up entrance stroke, come down straight, but then over here, remember we have a small, this should be more rounded. Okay, come up here, down, and then curving it up. So this was our lowercase u. Okay. So the bottoms of these U's are going to be more rounded, tighter curves. And then the top part of the U's are more of that really sharp edge for the connections. Okay, so the last combination will be your left curve and your straight line. So number 4 is going to be, let's see, left curve is going to come up like this. Left curve, and then transitioning to the straight. So I think someone was mentioning that this is more of like a shark fin, and that's actually a really good illustration. I would say that the bottom here, I always think about it as a check mark. So if you guys need another illustration in your mind, you can think about this as like the top of a shark fin. And so it's not going to be so sharp as in the top parts of the U, but this one, there should be a slight, very tight curve, okay? So the differences between, let's say, this particular stroke, and if I were to do a copper plate overturn stroke, the copper plate overturn stroke is more rounded, okay? It's more something like this, where we have a shade coming down here. Sorry, this one is all hairline stroke, and then gradually add pressure with the bottom part on the baseline. Okay, copper plate here. The difference between the Spencerian and copper plate mainly is that copper plate is all ovals. Everything you see is very oval based for this script. The Spencerian is a very, it is still angular in terms of like it's an angular oval. There is a little bit of that ovalness to it because it's not sharp edges throughout. You do want to aim to have a little bit of that curve because that's what makes the script very graceful versus like jagged. And so, but the difference here, I hope you can see, and I'm actually going to pull out some homeworks to demonstrate and show you guys the differences between what I'm seeing to be more copper plate versus like what we're trying to aim for the more Spencerian style. And as you guys are practicing the words and the flow of the script as you're writing, you should be able to notice a huge difference between the curvature here. Okay, so Angela, I hope that helps to see the differences between both of them. Okay, so I did want to just touch upon that question in the community groups. I hope this one was helpful. So again, number 4 and number 1 is more of an angular curve. Number 2 and number 3 is going to be more of that sharp edge connecting stroke. Okay, so let's move on to more homeworks here. I have, okay. So this is another, I did about 2 to 3 homeworks per module. So we're still on homework number 3. So the basic strokes, again, I know these longer stem loops are a little bit more trickier, extended loop strokes, but keep at it. I know this like transition from the straight to the slight curve here is really like makes me want to like tear out my hair too. I think with copper plate, it's not as, you don't have to like think so much as you're writing these particular strokes. And I think the reason why Spencerian does try to, encourage us to do a little bit more of a curve is because as I demonstrated in the lesson is that when you go all the way straight down and then you curve up, it's a little bit of a different shape than when you have more of that roundedness here, okay? And so again, that's our standard, but I don't want you guys to be so stressed out about it that you start hating Spencerian. So I would say, whatever I'm teaching you guys as like the standard for Spencerian, take it with a grain of salt. And of course, if you guys want to, make like not stress so much about this transition from the straight to this slightly right curve, then, just do your best. And I did want to say that because I didn't want you guys to be turned off by all of these strict rules. I definitely am not the type to police any of these structures on you guys. So, but I just wanted to show you guys the difference. So the difference between going all the way straight down versus having a little bit of that curve, you see how it looks a little more graceful on top. Because Spencerian doesn't have as much shades, I think the shades in copper plate add to that gracefulness in the curves, but Spencerian, like sometimes because it's a lot of the letters are hairline stroke, you do notice more of kind of the details of the script. Okay. So that was something I wanted to mention. Okay, so for the angular oval here, the reason why I started up here is this is becoming a little more rounded. So comparing it to the beginning strokes over here, what's happening here with the angular oval is you're basically combining your left curve with your right curve, okay? You should see these 2 basic strokes within this angular oval. The only difference is the top part of this stroke is going to have that flattened top. Okay, so you want to make sure you have that flattened top before you head down for that left curve. And then you want to make sure you have these really tight connecting curves here between the two strokes. Okay, so it's not going to be, it's hard to see because I don't have the guide sheet lines here, but we want to make sure if we have these as our lines, you don't want to go straight down like this, okay, because there's so much of a curve here and a space between your waistline and this curve, but make sure you do have that flattened top before you go down for your left curve, and then tighten up here with a slight like very tight curve, and then go up for your right curve. Okay, so flat left curve, turn right curve. That's kind of the shape. This particular one, I'm just assuming that if this was our lines here, you see how it's more wider. Okay, I think from here, after you make this flat top, which is really good, you want to angle it more down. Okay, you angle it more down and then do a tighter like upstroke for the finish. The straight, oh, these are the combinations that we talked about before. You just want to make sure that both of these connections should be more of like that, the angular curve for these connections. So I was checking off some of the good ones that I've seen. You want to make sure it's not too rounded like copper plate, but more of that angular ones. And then again, these are done all really well for the straight line, right curve, and left curve. The main thing for the upper extended loop strokes is I'm looking for where you are connecting this extended right curve. And when you transition to this stem here, you want to make sure that that intersection happens at the waistline. Okay, and so like more here is where I am aiming for the script. This one was, some of these are becoming a little bit lower, and so that's just something that you guys should watch out for as you guys practice. Okay, so let's move on to our lowercase letters. See if I have any other questions for module 3. Oh, okay. So one thing I did want to mention before we move on to, let's see. Here are some lowercase letters. Another question I got was how to start and end the shade on the semi-angular ovals. Another great question here. So I just want to use Mihoko's homework as an example here. So this, when you look at the letters here, let's look at the letter A together. Okay, so this is beautifully done. Okay, so the shade here, I would say should be more just where she put it. Okay, because if you look at the entire this left curve for this A, remember we have the straightened top. Okay, because we're retracing that entrance stroke, and then we're going to curve down here. Okay, and I would say that this entire left curve stroke with the flattened top, if you see that as like one whole stroke here, you want your shade to be more like in the middle. Okay, so anywhere so that you do have that nice transition from thin to thick to thin. And I would say that my handouts might be like a better example than some of the ones I did in the video lessons, but this is my handouts that I had given to you guys. So if you look at these letters, so for A and for D, the aim here is, you want to at least leave a little bit of room here for the transition from the thick to thin. And then this is hard to see because it's kind of combined with the entrance stroke here, but you are going to see this like hairline stroke and then gradually add pressure here and then release pressure. And so let me show you guys an example I saw in the homeworks, just to show you guys the difference. Okay. So here is one of the homeworks. Maybe the D is a little bit better. Okay. So this example here, you see how the shade is a little bit lower on the semi-angular oval. I would try to aim it, and let's look at down here too. The Q's, looking at the Q's, the D's up here, the D's, as well as the A's, okay? So the aim that I want to have is more, you can lift it a little bit higher. So somewhere between here and here is pretty like acceptable. Okay, so let's go on to the lowercase letter feedback. Okay, so this is Mihoko's. Very, very, very well done. I was going to mention here that for the D, the thing that I'm looking for is that you're starting with the square top, releasing pressure, and basically from your waistline to your baseline is going to be all hairline stroke. Okay, you just don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that it's not going to be so shaded at the bottom here. But that's the beauty of Spencerian, is that having just a little bit of that shade before you hit the hairline is what makes it very delicate. And someone was asking what should be the thickness of your shades. And I would say the standard is usually when you are, let's put 3 hairline strokes next to each other. I did see that that was kind of the standard for the thickness. So if we were to put 3 hairline strokes next to each other, this would be kind of like the thickest. Let's do that again. So wait, 1, 2, and then 3. It's hard to put 3 next to each other. Something like this. About 3 hairline strokes next to each other should be approximately the thickness of your shade. But I do want to say that, I think it's really nice if you even do a more of a dramatic shade for some of these letters. As long as the thickness of your shade is consistent throughout, I think it still looks really nice. Okay, so this is the D here. Do shade, release, and then the right curve. Okay. As long as the thickness, the general thickness for wherever you're putting your shade for your letters are consistent, that is what, like, so if you have a heavier hand and let's say your thickness is more like thick to thin, like something like that, versus others who might want to do it a little bit more thinner, that's fine. Just make sure that you're doing it throughout your entire piece. Okay. Okay. So another thing here that, so we talked about the shade placements of these angular ovals. So double check your work to make sure that your shade is going to be along this part of your stroke, because the entire left curve for this angular oval begins from here to here. Okay, so this is generally like the midpoint. Okay, you want to release pressure before you hit the waistline. I really love this D. I know you guys were asking about maybe some word examples for this letter. This one I usually use at the end of a word, but if you do use this variation in the middle of a word, then obviously you cannot connect it to the next letter. And so if it was like DE, then I would just write an E right next to it. Okay, with the appropriate spacing. Okay, so let's see here. Again, beautifully done. Everything looks very graceful. The slight shades here on the H, the F shade on the bottom here. With the G, this is the standard for the shade placement. But if you wanted to, have a more of a shaded Spencerian, a more weighted look, you can also do a slight shade here at the bottom. And that will actually help you give a little bit of that curvature that we were talking about before, the struggle with the shape of those extended loop strokes. Okay. Something I did want to point out here is to watch out for the size of this particular P. And so you want to make this implied oval a little bit more like thicker. I would say this one looks like it's about half of that unit space, but you can make it a little bit wider to do it more of like 2/3. Okay, so it kind of opens up that letter a little bit more. With this Q, this is more of a gradual kind of, let me see, this paper is not ideal for pointed pen, but let's see if it works. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so for the Q here, you guys can see this, but I start from here, come up, add pressure, release, oops, okay, and then from here, we're gonna go down, add shade, release, and then come up. Okay, so just make sure that this curve right here, you shouldn't come in and then out, but it should be more along straight up and then transitioning into that left curve. Okay, so just smoothing out that stroke. Let's see here. The rest of the letters look really nice. And actually, I'm going to demonstrate this X because I know that was a question that came up as well. So let me just go back into this guide sheet here. So the X, it was tricky. And I was like studying that letter for the past like 2 weeks because I was trying to figure out what was, like try to figure out the best way to teach it as well as the best way for you guys, for us all to practice this particular letter. So I realized I'm going to show you guys another way to write this X, which might be easier than, what I've included in the course. Actually, I'm going to update that particular letter in the course portal. It's just not ready right now. And so all the updates again are included with your registration. So you don't have to worry about that. Let's see. Okay. So another way to write X is actually, so we talked about in the video, I realized, it is more on a different curve. And in the video for the course, let me move in closer so you guys can see. One. Okay, so in the course, I was rewatching the video that I did, and I showed you guys to make it more of a straighter, a straighter line here because it's not on the 52-degree slant line. And then we did that like rounded angular finish, right? And it was a 2-unit wide letter. But the problem that, was pointed out was that the left side of this letter and the right side of this letter cannot be equal in width. And this is obvious because when we made the turn here to here, this is 1 unit space apart. And then the bottom here is more than 1 unit space. So obviously the right side of this letter is going to look a little bit more smaller. So to help with this, I actually want to show you guys another way to write X. I'm going to do it over here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go left curve, come along your slant, and then angle out. Okay, let me just finish this first and then we'll break it down together. Then we're going to lift up our pen and then angular finish. Okay, so this is this should touch like very slightly here along that slant line. Okay, so this is another way to write your X. And I think this is going to be much better in terms of the spacing between the left and the right will be more identical. So what we're doing here is we're doing a left curve. Okay, and then we're going to transition to hitting that straight line. But then as you get to the baseline, we're going to angle it out with the right curve. Okay, so it's going to touch at about here, which is, I would say, about 1/3 of a unit space. And so the same thing up here, if we were to divide this into thirds, I'll probably start this top part of this X going into left curve. Touch that straight line. You can angle out here. So it's more of like a C curve, and then finish off with your X. Okay, let's do it again. There should be no shade here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay, so you can write your X's like this. Make sure you touch it a little bit here, or you can even add a crossbar like that. Okay, another way to do it, if you wanted to do it in one motion here before you add in this crossbar for this X, is you can actually do it like this then. You can go left curve, go on your slant. Okay, but I'm going from the left side, a little bit left side of the straight line to a little bit right side of the slant line. Okay, and then from here, we're gonna go exit. Okay, so let's do that motion again. So left curve. Okay, I'll probably do a little bit more like this. Okay, that's better. Okay, so the shape here is you want to have a little bit of space left of that slant line and to the right of that slant line. And then now from here, you can do that cross. Okay, and now when you do that X, you will see the same spacing here, left and right of that letter. So hopefully that like clarified things, because I know X was like pretty tricky. And so I realized like the reason why, so right here, when you're doing the straight line here, again, like this angle is not on your slant line. You see how this goes like that? Okay. The angle is 52 degrees going this way. And then our transition stroke here for that straight line is going more like 90 degrees, more upright. Okay, so let me just demo both for you guys one more time. Are you guys understanding this? Okay, let's see. Ready? So we go left curve, touch the middle, right curve, and then cross. Okay, this would be a better, so not going all the way to here and then go down. Okay, that's what we were doing before. I would actually make the turn a little bit before the slant line, and that should help with the spacing between the left and the right side of this letter. Okay, so I'll do a check mark here. Okay, and then the second way would be if you wanted to separate it out into two different, picking up your pen, you would go 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay, so that would be the second way to do your X's. I would, Chian was asking if it's still acceptable. I would actually just practice like this. Because I'm going to change all the videos for this letter because it is confusing, because if we want to aim to have a similar width left and right of the letter, the way that I was like showing you guys in the beginning when I was moving it over like to this part right here, it just was impossible. I know you guys were like mentioning that to me too. Like if you put a crossbar here, you notice that the right curve here is a little bit tighter than the left curve. And so if you practice it, just slightly adjusting where you're making the turn. So not turning it at that slant line, but turning it a little bit before the slant line, then that should like fix that problem. It should, be, it should help with the spacing. But when you're writing words, obviously, like, you're not going to have all of these guys to really help you guys. But generally speaking, yeah, that's kind of the flow of the X. Okay, great. So I hope that clarifies X. Let's see. Let's move on to, I have other homeworks here I was going to mention. Okay. So more lowercase letters, and then we'll move on to the connections. Okay, so again, some couple of things here to watch out for. Again, this is another reason why practicing the basic strokes and even the nib exercises are going to be super helpful because we're going from thick to thin. And this actually is not a great paper for pointed pen. This is just copy paper, but to have a nice transition, this one was a little bit more abrupt from that thick to thin. And so definitely go back, and as you're working through the course, feel free to keep working on like 5 minutes of nib exercises or like 10 minutes of warm up. I think you guys are still in that learning phase and getting comfortable with, whether it be getting comfortable with the nib or comfortable with this particular script. And so taking the time to really focus on those nib exercises and even these basic strokes. If you want to take a whole day just to practice going from your angular oval that we were talking about, the shade placement of your A's and your D's and your G's, you can even just practice those letters in one day. So going from here to shade and then release pressure. You can even spend time just practicing the shade placement. Okay, so thin to thick to thin, let's flatten top, add shade, and then release. Okay, and then this one will go back up here and then come down for your A. Or if you feel like you need more practice on these connective turns to be more of that nice, tight, angular curve versus more of a sharper curve, the things that we talk about today will help you to know how to diagnose the areas that you want to really focus your practice on. And that would be my tip for you guys moving forward as you guys are looking at your work and your homeworks, to know like what are some trouble areas, and not to try to practice all of it at once, but maybe segment it in a way that you can really hone in on like one particular, muscle memory before you move on to the next one. Okay, so so this is an example of what I want to show you guys, the differences between having a sharper edge on top here versus, so I want you guys to look at difference between this part of the end and this one. I put a check mark here because this is much better. There is more of that really graceful curve here at the top versus this one was very pointed. Okay, and we talked about this before earlier in the live session, but you don't want the top parts of your end to be so pointed. The bottom will be pointed. So this part definitely will be a very sharp turn, but make sure that the top parts of your end is more of the angular curve. But I want you guys to look at the difference between this particular side of N versus this M. This M would be more, I would say, copperplate. The roundedness for these M's here, if you look at I like envision this oval shape. Okay, you see how it's more curved here on the top. So this looks more of a copperplate versus more of an angular M. So let me show you guys the difference. Okay, this is still 52. So with copperplate, if I were to use still this guide sheet, okay, this is more copperplate, and then this would be more of the Spencerian. Okay, do you guys see the difference? Okay, so here is more, copperplate has more of that roundedness on the top. And you can tell if you see that this particular triangle here on the top part of this over curve from your left curve to the straight line, if it's more rounded, that's more copperplate. Notice here, the spacing of this triangle shape here on the top of my M's are a lot more bigger. Why? It's because I am angling my upstroke. This left curve is a little bit lower than the ones up here. Okay. So just make sure that you're aiming more for this angular script versus the rounded script for the oval script for copperplate. All right, let's move on to, okay. I would say there was a question regarding this particular cue, and I'm just going to go right into that one. I think it was, oh, sorry, one more thing I did want to mention. I know in some of my examples, I did add a shade to the letter M here at the last line. And the question was, is it supposed to have a shade, or is it a matter of preference? And so I addressed it in the community group, but certain letters, I would say that if you want to add more shade, this is where you learned a standard. And then I'm actually thinking about, for the next update, I want to make a video or like a little note on, how to make adjustments to your Spencerian script. And so that would be a matter of personal preference. So with the standard N, it is just no hair, it's no shade. So here's N. But then for me, sometimes when I'm writing a word, subconsciously, I will add a shade to the second downstroke. Okay. And so that's something that you guys can also try. If you were to add a shade instead of the first downstroke, I like putting it on the second downstroke like this. And that's the same with the M. The M, I usually put it at the last downstroke. Okay, so here's M. And then this is with the shade. Okay, it just adds a little bit more weight to when you're writing out the letters. The other place that I like to add a little bit of shade would be my R's. Okay, so the standard R is something like this. Okay, no shade for the R, but with like a variation, it's not really a variation, but with a personal preference, if you want to add more of the weight, I like to add it right along that slant line for the R. Okay, so moving forward, so we did the X, we did the shade placements for these letters. I want to talk about the second variation for the Q, because Jariha was asking about how to connect the Q to a U. And that was a great question, because that's something that I didn't talk about in the lesson. So let's do that together. So the Q that she's talking about is the one where we did before. So here we have, let's do our left curve, add pressure, release, and then from here, add pressure, come up. Okay, so this was our Q. And how do we connect this to a letter like U? So U usually starts with your under curve, your right curve. So right curve, down, right curve, down, and then finish with the right curve. Okay, it's literally impossible to go from your over curve to the left curve that the U needs. So what I would do with something like this is that you can actually go into this over curve. So this is your left curve, and then come down. And I would probably connect it like this. If I do. Okay, if I want to connect it with the Q to a U, because this is such an extended left curve, it's really hard to go from keeping the shape of this Q to go into your right curve for the U. So what I'm talking about is, let's say if we do the Q here, and then we, from here, I was just thinking it's just really hard to then transition to an undercurve for the U. Okay, so this would be more of a graceful connection. And so this is where I want to say that for the U's, the way that we are learning it from the standard Spencerian is with this right curve. However, if there are situations like the Queen with the Q, it always connects, well, most of the time it connects with the U, then I would, you can definitely start your U's like this. Because this still looks like a U, okay? As long as you were not manipulating what the letter looks like, you can also enter it with an over curve, a left curve instead of a right curve. And this goes for the letter V. The way that we learned letter V, we did it with a left curve, add a shade, half, and then pivot out, right? But if there's a case where you want to include this particular lowercase letter with a right curve, I think it's fine to enter it into it like this too, like that. Okay, so I hope you guys see that with these letters, you can make slight adjustments to your entrance strokes depending on the connections. And those are great questions because I didn't even think about this particular version. I was just thinking that if I were to do a Queen or a U like this, I would probably use the first variation for the Q because that just naturally goes right into the U. So like if we were to do Q and then from here, from the baseline, it's really easy to just go right into the U because that's just naturally connecting like that, okay? That's why it is nice to have a variation, but I do realize with the Q, I was like looking up words where like just any word that contains a Q, and I realized that most of the time it's connected with a U. All right, let me look at my comments here. Okay, so most of the, Michelle saying most of the lowercase letters are hairline. Yes, so you do have the option to add a slight shading to add more weight to the letters for certain lowercase letters where, let me pull up my exemplar again. Okay, let's see. So this is regarding letters that don't have any shade at all. I would not put a weight to this downstroke for the A, because again, if we're adding weight to every downstroke, it will look more like copperplate. So the whole like beauty of Spencerian is like the delicacy of it, and because it has more hairline, it's a running script. I do feel like the small subtle shades makes the letter look really nice, but if you do want to add slight more weight to your letters, this is where I was saying that I personally add weight to it. So letters that don't have any weight, so right here, this is actually the third downstroke for the M, and then the N and the R's. Okay, so M, N, and R is usually where I would do it. But I guess if you wanted to add even a little bit of shade to this part of this O, you can even do it on the left side of this O a little bit. But I just try to shy away from adding too much shade to every downstroke, because that is what separates Spencerian with copperplate. So copperplate is all shade with every downstroke. Spencerian is you have a little bit of that variation, like you don't add a shade to every downstroke, which is what makes it so beautiful. But again, knowing the standard is our goal. And then from there, you guys do have the freedom to kind of make it your own. So if you want the more shaded script and the shaded Spencerian style, you can definitely add more shades if you wish. Okay, so let's do, oh, Judy was asking how to write the word event. Okay, so let's do that together. I'll do it on this line. Okay, so event. Let's move it up. Okay. Okay, so here's my E. B. And then T. So this part with the T, the standard is to just cross it right here. But I know like in the video, I did a lot of this, the wavy crossbar. And this wavy crossbar, you can go through the letter, or actually I think the standard usually for Spencerian for this T, people do it on the top. Okay. So you can do it both on the top of the T, or, for me, I like to go through it as well. And this is more, I guess, more flourishes, because then you can always curve it back into your crossbar like that. But the basic T would just be your straight line. Something like that. Okay, so let's make sure, I just want to make sure I am answering all these questions. Okay, I am going to show you guys. Let's move on to the homeworks with the connections. And I think that was some of the questions I had received. Okay, so this is Natalie's homework. Okay, again, beautiful job with this. Let me just zoom it out here. Okay. And I think the fun of Spencerian is like when you start writing words, because I do feel like, we do focus a lot on the individual letters, but then when you start writing the words, you kind of get into that flow mindset. And so I hope you guys are enjoying just, more of that feel as you guys are practicing these words. Okay, so great job with these words. It's hard for me to tell exactly, because I know you guys are some of you guys are not writing directly on the guide sheet, and you're using a paper on top of it. And so it's hard for me to tell in terms of the proportions and stuff, but generally when I'm looking at it, very nicely done. The spacing here is really nice. I hope it's been helpful when I was demonstrating to you guys how, when you're practicing on your guide sheets, sheets for the connecting letters, you don't want to, it's really hard to practice knowing exactly when to do your next letter, because depending on certain letter combinations, it just can be very like stressful trying to figure out, okay, which one is 1 1/4 spaced apart and which one is one unit spaced apart. And this one I was just sharing as an example too. I think this was Joanna's, but the example here is the only way that it does help in terms of using these guide sheets is that when you are connecting the A to an N, for example, this spacing here should be a little bit more wider apart. So if you look at the spacing overall here versus here, I could tell immediately that the spacing between these letters are a little bit more wider apart. And that's also different from copperplate, because copperplate is a little bit more, I would say, I don't know, constricted or tighter versus Spin Syrian. Spin Syrian, what's helped me when I'm practicing is knowing that the angle that I'm aiming for is a 30-degree connecting slant. So I shared this in the video, but if we were to, this is our baseline here. I just envision if I'm going to separate it into like 3 different angles here, this is 30 degrees. Okay, so you do want to make sure you are below, not making these connective strokes too high, because once you start making these connective strokes higher, then it makes you connect your next letters tighter, if that makes sense. But if you keep these connective strokes lower and making sure that you're trying to stay close to the baseline with a slight curve up at about 30-degree connective slant, the curvature here should all be on the same angle. Okay. And that is also what's going to separate out your letters between each other. So that's hard to do, especially when you have a letter like B and an O, because a B is along the waistline. So that's what I noticed even for my own practices. I realized that when I'm doing connections of letters that is going from the baseline, it's a little bit easier to space it apart. But the temptation is if I'm doing connections between letters that like B and O, it's easier for me to just go right into it. But technically for this particular word here, okay, it should be more space apart, okay? Because if you want to do it similar to the next letter here, okay? So those are just some things that you'll realize as you are practicing, and you compare some of your words to your other letters and your other words here. Immediately, this word here seems a little bit more closer together than elegant. Okay, there was a question about whether the O and the U was done correctly, and I just wanted to say it was. The way that you connect the O to a U is you have your O like this, and then you want to dip down and then go right into your U. Okay, so that's how you would connect the O and U, and that was done really nicely up here. Let's see. The things I did want to mention here. So this is what we talked about before, and why I wanted to address it is I realized that with this particular variation for the Q, it's hard to go into the U without making it sharp. And so we talked about, then let's do a more of that over curve, okay, for that particular combination for the Q and the U. Okay, let me bring that in closer. Okay. Okay. So that's why when we compare this particular Q and then this particular Q, this one naturally goes into the U, okay, really nicely. This one, there's a struggle here because it was hard to figure out where to do this. Okay, so I would do a slight curve here, tight curve, and then you can add a little bit of pressure if you want to along the downstroke of this U, and then go into your next stroke here. I did want to say to just watch out that your loops are not collapsing. I know that with the smaller X height, it is so hard to keep those loops open. So whether it be for this E or whether it be for this particular C variation that we did, okay? If you try to write this C on a 3mm guide sheet, it is so hard to even see that loop there. And so in general, that's why I do recommend writing with a more rigid, firm tip nib. All of my course videos were written with this Nikko G. So Nikko G, Zebra G, Titanium Zebra G, Tachikawa G, all of those G nibs are, I would say, ideally for me, that's what's been working the best, because once I start using like the other nibs, or and especially if you have a heavier hand, then all of a sudden, all of your Spencerian is going to look really heavy. But in order to maintain, by the way, this is done really nicely. It's very nice hairlines. So if you want to if you have a hard time with like the heaviness of your script and feeling like your Spencerian looks very weighted, I would try to stick with just the G nibs for now. That should kind of help. But with this E, if you're combining and you notice that the loop is going to like close up, and you're doing it from this U, make sure you're then lowering that angle. Okay, sometimes you might have to lower this angle more in order to accommodate for that E. Okay. You just want the main goal here is to have these loops be open so that it doesn't close up, because then that can look like an eye. And we just want to make sure that it's not going to be confused with that. Okay, so other things to watch out for as you guys are practicing is, again, these turns, not to make it super sharp, but the 4 different strokes that we talked about earlier in the session, you guys can keep practicing those and realize when it should be sharper and when it should have a slight curve to it. Let's see. I think that was it for here. There was a request to write the word relaxed. Okay, so let me go back to this particular paper, and then we'll go down here. Okay, so relaxed. You scribble out. Okay, R. I'm gonna add a shade here. Oops, I was off screen. Oh, no. Okay, and then from here, you can then do your crossbar for your X. Okay, so you notice that for this X, I'm not stopping to do the crossbar, but I'm going straight from your A to your X, and I'm going to finish the word, and then I go back and do your crossbar. Okay, because it really affects the flow if you're trying to stop here, cross it, and then finish your E and D. Okay, so that's how I would write relax. And then there was a request for me to write P-A to Z. So let's do that together. Okay, so P, actually, I'm going to do it up here. Okay, so here's our P. And the sharp bottom here. Okay, A, and then going into our A. Oh, that one was more rounded. It should be a little bit more angular. Okay, so A, P, A, and then Z. Okay, that's how I would do A to a Z. So the connection here would be downstroke connection and going right into the top part of the Z. Like that. Let's see, other questions. I just want to make sure I'm looking at my sheet here. Do you guys have any questions for me? Feel free to ask me in the chat box, because I know you guys, your time is oh, okay. So I did get a question from Tina asking about writing French words. So to make sure that it still looks So honestly, I don't have any experience writing in French, but I can try and show you guys how I would personally do it. Let me grab another sheet of paper. Okay, so let's write the word hotel. I think that was one of the requests here. Okay, so all right, so we'll do the hotel, and then there's like a little bit of that curve on the top. Okay, so H. Going to your O. Pick up your pen here, and then we're going to do that thick to thin. And you notice that when I'm writing, so this is a 5mm guide sheet. I would say 4 is probably the most comfortable I like practicing on. The 5 is a little bigger, which is why you notice that I do lift my pen a little more, because it just helps with the flow. If when I'm writing on a smaller guide sheet, I don't pick up my pen as much because I'm able to write through. But if you're working on 6, especially 6mm, 5mm, you are feel free to like lift your pen as much as you need to. Okay, so this one, I think there was like a little bit of a triangle here on top, like that. Okay, I would just, the only thing I can say for something like this would be to make sure that this is also angle. So not to have this triangle be like on like a straighter, a more like 90-degree, triangle, but because we are still trying to maintain that 52-degree slant, to make it look more cohesive, I would just do all of these little markings on the same slant line. Okay, so hotel, and this time I'm just going to add in the crossbar on top, and then you can even pull it through the L. And then there was another Noel, and that's actually appropriate for, I guess, Christmas. Let's see. Okay, so this one, capital letter, where again, didn't really want to do capitals today because we didn't even cover that, but let me just demonstrate it for you guys here. N O and then E. Remember we talked about with the O to an E, you want to dip it down lower so that you don't collapse this oval shape here for this E. Okay, Noel, oops. Okay, the spacing here, again, you notice, I just realized right after I wrote it, I just noticed that the spacing is way too wide here compared to the NOE. Okay, so I should have actually pulled this up a little bit more right here. Okay, but in terms of making those dots, again, I would probably make those symbols in between the waistline and your first ascender line. Okay, not too high or not too low. And then there was one more with the deja. I guess it's for deja vu. Let's see, D. E. And then for this one, let's say we do a dot for the J, and then there's like oh, I guess if you have more symbols like this, it would have to be on the same line. I wouldn't want this symbol, if my dot is here, I wouldn't want it to be lower. Probably then I would do it on this line, go like that. And then the other symbol for the A, I would just do it on the other side because it looks like when you're typing on the computer, it's going something like that. actually, that's a little long. It should be the same. So I'll probably practice making the same height, or maybe from here to here, and then from here to here. This was a little long. Okay, so I think that's all I have time for. I guess if you have any other questions. Oh, I think Sarah did mention to demonstrate two more combinations, RS and RW. So here's R to an S. Okay, and then an R to an H. Okay, this time I'll just keep it all hairline. To an H. Okay, so I think I pretty much covered all the questions that I got in the community group. Let's see the chat box. IJ, do you have a specific word in mind that starts with a Z that you would, I guess I could just do zoo or zebra, or let's see. Starting with, I'm guessing that's a lowercase z that you're talking about, not the capital letter, because we didn't cover the capital letters yet. But with the Z, again, it's the left curve, slight shade, release, come around on this side of the slant, and then finish with your extended left curve, okay? Or you can go from left curve, thin to thick, and then from here, move it over, and then go into your next letter. So something like this. Ladily, could you write something with the T variation in the middle? Right, I did want to answer that question. That particular T, I do recommend using it at the end. So if we were to write the word mint, let's see here. And then from here, so that's kind of where I would use the T. It is a little hard, I would say, for, oh, this is a little off slant. This should just be a hairline stroke down here. It is a little hard for people to know even what this is, because it doesn't look like a T at all. It's just one of those things that maybe it's a little confusing in terms of the letter form. So I would say even for this, if you want to, you can even add a crossbar to this particular end. So if you were ending it with this one, only because if you don't do that, and let's say you go right into, let's say a word that then begins with like an A or something, I don't know, I'm just making up a word now. Let's say it's like in the middle of a word here. If you don't have this crossbar, like that could look like really weird. Like, I don't know, it could either look like an elongated I, or I just feel like it could be more confusing to people to know what you're trying to write. And so if you want to use this variation for T, I would leave it for the end. Or because usually even when you do it at the end, a lot of times with the flourishing, you can always go like this and then bring it back down below the baseline. And I like this kind of a finish here for this T. But doing a crossbar, if it helps with legibility, you can definitely add that in. And again, the crossbar can go through it, or it can go above it, or you can do just a straight line across. Let's see, how much time would be ideal to practice a script? So that is like a really hard question to answer, because there is no, I would say, standard in terms of practice times, because everyone's schedule is different, their lifestyles and how much free time they have. For me, when I first started learning calligraphy, I only had nighttime to practice after my kids were sleeping. And so I would, if depending on how tired I was, I would probably aim for about like 30 minutes to an hour, just because I didn't want to overwhelm myself with my goals. But if for Spencerian, depending on how much time you have, even 1 hour a day, if you do it consistently enough, it will give you much more confidence as you get used to writing in the script. And so if you are, actually, I feel like I need to like turn my camera. Let me see, let me just turn my camera so I can feel like I'm talking to you guys. Let's see, oops. Okay. So if you are practicing the script for the first time and you're still trying to get comfortable with the letter forms, I would focus more on, let's say, the letter group. So you know how with the lowercase letters, like we did similar groups depending on what kind of strokes that they share. And so you can even take that 1 hour and practice all of that common letters that we talked about. And then the next day work on the next group of letters. But again, I would definitely still do the basic strokes, nib exercises, warm-ups, especially when you're just starting off, just to loosen up your hand and not get super tense when you're writing. When it comes to differences between copperplate and Spencerian, I started with copperplate, so I would say I focused on copperplate for a good year before there was even any class that I could take for Spencerian. But I was telling certain students that if you want to learn them simultaneously, I think it's totally possible, because these two scripts are related to one another. They're both pointed pen. They both have to be written on that lettering slant. And so there's not so much of like a switch versus if you were to do like a Gothic script style with a broad edge tip versus a pointed nib. And so as long as you do, let's say 1 week of copperplate, or a full first 3 days of copperplate and then 2 days of Spencerian, or like, let's say you do this whole month, you're going to start focusing on Spencerian and then do the next month in copperplate. I think that would be, for me, it would help me so that I'm not trying to do both scripts at the same day. So hopefully that helps. If you guys, do you guys have any other questions for me? I know I don't want to keep you guys too long. It's already 11:50. Let's see. For addressing envelopes, recommend. I think it's fine to do a little bit bigger. I would say the 3 does seem a little small. I don't know if you guys tried the 4mm one. I like the 4mm. I could go maybe anywhere in between. And it also depends on the size of your envelopes. I know some envelopes are bigger, so you can write a little bigger, and some envelopes are smaller. I guess you can do lowercase if you wanted to. I am going to be teaching you guys the uppercase. So if you are to address envelopes, I would try to practice with the uppercase letters. Do you guys have any other questions for me? Let's see if I can view it with the gallery. Amanda, Deb, Norma, hi. I love seeing your faces. But so sorry again for all of the technical difficulties. Hi, Carol. But I hope you guys are learning a lot. I hope you guys are enjoying the script and utilizing that community group. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, I would really encourage you guys to get on that community group, because I'm on there. And if you guys are asking questions on there, I make sure to answer all questions that I see. So if I miss your question, and if you feel like I'm not, so I just want to tell you, I'm not purposely ignoring you guys. You guys can feel free to email me. Just give me a gentle reminder. Hey, I asked this question. Happy to help you guys. So the uppercase letters are going to be on Monday. So next Monday, we have another 2 weeks for uppercase letters. I'm trying to edit and finish it up before Monday. If not, I'll drip it out. So I'll do, because there's a lot to cover in the uppercase, and I do include some variations for certain uppercase letters. And so for the next round, I'm already making like a running list of updates that I want to do. So just thank you so much for your patience. And yeah, let me know just your feedback on these live sessions. I know in the beginning, when people were asking for like individual feedback, it's just really hard for me to provide individual feedback for everybody. But I added on these live sessions because I wanted it to be just like an added like help for you guys to give group feedbacks, and also to help demonstrate any requests. So that question about the Q and the U was actually really helpful. And so I'm learning as you're asking questions, and I hope we can learn together. So thank you so much for just your grace for waiting for me this morning. And I hope this was really helpful for you guys. I'm going to, okay, so when I'm adding new handouts, what I do now is in the course downloads in your portal, I'm constantly updating the master PDF. Just because there might be people who haven't even downloaded that yet. And so you'll see now, because I didn't want to have like 20 different links up there. And so now you should only have about 2 for every like update. So every time I update for the uppercase this round, I'll have a separate link for the PDF for the uppercase letters, but I'll also update the master PDF that combines everything together, so that if you want to download just the update, you can do that. And then if you want to just print out, because I don't want you guys to print out everything again. So I'll make sure to separate that out, and then I'll keep updating it like that. And then I usually do add the date to the course page so that you guys know when I updated different things. Okay, we're almost like at the end, just 2 more weeks for uppercase letter. And then I do want to film like a bonus lesson for numbers for Spencerian that you can use for especially like addressing envelopes and such. So I would say maybe we'll wrap it up in about 3 weeks. If you guys are interested, I am opening up my copperplate course opens up in December, and then my flourishing one opens up next week. And those are just now, I have 3 courses now that I'm running throughout the year. And so I just got to figure out my schedule. Symbols, yes, I wasn't planning on it, but I can add a couple of symbols for the lesson. Let me write that down so I don't forget. Okay, so some symbol examples along with the numbers, and that's not going to come until after the uppercase letters. So ampersand and okay, and the pound symbol. Okay, thank you so much for all of your questions and for participating in the session. So good to see your faces. I will post a link to the replay once I log off here, and then I'll see you guys inside the community group, as well as the next live session that we have. We're going to focus a lot on the uppercase letters, because I know that can be a whole different beast to conquer together. So I'll let you guys know when that will be, probably not until like 3 weeks for the uppercase. It gives you guys time to practice and to kind of like soak in the material. And then we'll go over any questions that might come up for that particular section. Okay, thank you so much again. And I'll talk to you guys again soon. Okay, bye guys.